Daniel Cooper sold everything he owned, his car, his furniture, his grandfather's watch, even his wedding ring, to pay for his wife Amanda's cancer treatment, watching his bank account drain to zero while she fought for her life in a hospital bed. But what he didn't know was that Amanda was already planning to leave him for his boss, Richard Hastings, the moment she recovered. Daniel, a devoted husband who'd worked 3 jobs and maxed out every credit card to cover the medical bills his insurance wouldn't touch, believed his wife's grateful tears and whispered promises of forever were real, completely unaware that Amanda and Richard had been having an affair in his office while Daniel was scrubbing floors at night to afford her chemotherapy. Amanda left him 2 weeks after her final treatment, moving into Richard's penthouse with the engagement ring Daniel could never afford, both of them laughing about the pathetic husband who gave up everything for a woman who never loved him. But neither Amanda nor his boss Richard knew that Daniel's estranged uncle had just died and left him inherit $600 million in real estate holdings and investment portfolios. What happens when a man who sacrificed everything for love discovers the woman he saved never deserved saving? What did Daniel do when he inherits $600 million that would shock his ex-wife so completely she'd realize she threw away a fortune for a fraud? And why would a betrayal so cruel, a boss so predatory, and a sacrifice so absolute lead to a revelation that would leave everyone who underestimated him absolutely speechless? The inheritance. Daniel Cooper sat in the attorney's office with holes in his shoes and $37 in his checking account. The letter had arrived 3 days ago, formal and insistent, requesting his immediate presence regarding the estate of William Theodore Cooper. Daniel had almost ignored it. His uncle William had cut off contact with the family 20 years ago, after some argument Daniel had been too young to understand, and he'd assumed the old man had died alone and bitter with nothing to leave anyone. But the letter had been persistent, and Daniel had nothing else to do. Amanda had taken everything when she left. Not that there was much to take. The apartment was empty now, echoes bouncing off bare walls. She'd moved out while he was at work, efficient and cold, leaving only a note. I deserve better than this life. Richard can give me what you never could. Richard Hastings, Daniel's boss at Hastings Commercial Real Estate, the man Daniel had worked for during the day while cleaning office buildings at night and driving for a rideshare app on weekends. The man who'd offered Daniel flexible hours during Amanda's treatment, which Daniel had thought was kindness, but now understood was opportunity. Opportunity to sleep with his employee's wife while that employee was too exhausted and desperate to notice. Mr. Cooper? The attorney, Helen Vasquez, studied him with sharp, assessing eyes. She was in her 60s, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and older wisdom. Thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing. I didn't know my uncle was still alive, Daniel said quietly. My mother said he disappeared decades ago. William was very much alive. He was also very wealthy and very intentional about his privacy. Helen opened a thick file. He followed your life from a distance, Daniel. He knew about your marriage, your wife's illness, your sacrifices. He was particularly moved by what you did for Amanda. Daniel's chest tightened. The memories were too fresh, too raw. Selling his car and taking 3 buses to get to work. Pawning his grandfather's watch, the only thing his father had left him. Calling Amanda's parents to beg for help and being told they'd already done enough for their daughter. The final, desperate decision to sell his wedding ring, the symbol of promises Amanda had already decided to break. Why didn't he help? Daniel's voice cracked. If he knew, if he was watching, why didn't he help when I needed it? Helen's expression softened. He wanted to. He called me a dozen times asking if he should intervene. But William believed that character was forged in crisis, that you needed to discover who you were without the safety net of his money. He believed Amanda needed to reveal who she was without the influence of wealth. She revealed it, Daniel said bitterly. She left me for my boss 2 weeks after I saved her life, which is exactly what William predicted. Helen slid a document across the desk. Your uncle passed away 4 months ago. His estate has been in probate, but everything is settled now. Daniel, your uncle left you his entire fortune, $607 million in assets, real estate holdings across 12 states, investment portfolios, business interests, and liquid assets. The room tilted. Daniel gripped the armrest, unable to process the numbers. That's not possible. It's very possible. William started with nothing and built a real estate empire over 50 years. He never married, never had children, and he was very specific about his heir. He chose you because he saw in you what he valued most: integrity, sacrifice, genuine love. He wanted you to have the resources to build a meaningful life. Helen opened another folder, pulling out a letter. He also left you this. He wrote it 2 weeks before he died. Daniel took the envelope with shaking hands. His uncle's handwriting was spidery but clear. Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you've just learned you're a wealthy man. I'm sorry I couldn't help you during Amanda's illness. I'm sorrier still that I was right about her character. I watched from afar as you sold everything, sacrificed everything, loved with a purity I've rarely witnessed. You deserve better than what she gave you. Here's what I learned in 83 years. Money reveals people. It doesn't change them. It reveals who they always were. Amanda showed you her true self when she thought you had nothing. Your boss showed you his character when he took advantage of your vulnerability. These are gifts, Daniel, even though they hurt. Now you have a choice. You can use this wealth for revenge, which would be satisfying but empty. You can hide it and continue living small, which would be safe but wasteful. Or you can use it to build something that matters, to become the kind of man who makes wealth meaningful rather than corrosive. I recommend the third option. Build something beautiful. Help people who are struggling the way you struggled. And don't hide from the people who betrayed you. Let them see who you've become, not to hurt them, but to show them the cost of their choices. You're a good man, Daniel. Now you're a good man with resources. Use them wisely. Make me proud. Your uncle, William. Daniel read it 3 times, tears blurring the words. Helen sat quietly, allowing him to grieve and process. Finally, he looked up. What happens now? Now we begin the transfer process. I'll need you to make some decisions about asset management and financial strategy. But first, she hesitated. I need to ask if anyone knows about this inheritance. No, just you and me. Good. Your uncle included specific instructions about discretion. He was concerned about people who might suddenly become interested in you once your financial status changed. Helen's eyes were knowing. People like Amanda and Richard Hastings. Daniel thought about Amanda's note, the casual cruelty of it. He thought about Richard's smirk in the office, the way he'd called Daniel into his workspace last week to check in about the divorce, barely hiding his triumph. They'd won. They had each other. They had money. They had the life Daniel could never provide, except they didn't know what Daniel now had. I'd like to keep this private, Daniel said slowly, at least for now. Helen smiled. Your uncle predicted you'd say that. He also left detailed guidance about what he called strategic patience. He believed the best way to handle betrayal wasn't immediate retaliation, but careful observation. Let people show you who they really are when they think you're powerless, then decide what they deserve. Daniel left the office 4 hours later with new bank accounts, a financial management team, and a completely different future. He walked through the city in a daze, past the bus stop where he'd waited countless times to get to his third job, past the pawn shop where he'd sold his grandfather's watch, past Hastings Commercial Real Estate with its gleaming glass facade and Richard's name in gold letters. His phone buzzed. Amanda! Hey, I know this is weird, but I left some stuff at the apartment. Can I come by this weekend to get it? I don't want things to be hostile between us. Daniel stared at the message. 3 weeks ago, this would have destroyed him. The casual tone, the assumption that they could be cordial after what she'd done. Now, with his uncle's letter fresh in his mind and $600 million in his future, he felt something unexpected. Not anger, not even satisfaction. Clarity. He remembered everything now with different eyes. The way Amanda had started pulling away 6 months before her diagnosis, right around the time Richard had promoted her to executive assistant. The late nights at the office that Daniel had assumed were legitimate work. The way she'd insisted he take night shifts and weekend jobs so we can save money, which had conveniently kept him away while she built her relationship with Richard. The moment in the hospital when Richard had visited, bringing expensive flowers and staying just a little too long. Touching Amanda's hand with a familiarity Daniel had dismissed as compassion. They'd been planning this for over a year. While Daniel had maxed out credit cards and worked himself to exhaustion, Amanda and Richard had been building their future together. They'd waited just long enough for her to recover, just long enough to seem somewhat decent. His uncle had known. Somehow, watching from whatever distance he'd maintained, William had known. Daniel walked to a small diner and ordered coffee he could finally afford. He pulled out his uncle's letter and read it again, focusing on one line. Let them see who you've become, not to hurt them, but to show them the cost of their choices. He thought for a long time. Then he made a decision that would shock everyone who thought they knew him. Daniel wasn't going to tell anyone about the money. Not yet. He was going to continue living simply, watching carefully, learning exactly who Amanda and Richard were when they thought he was broken. He was going to build something his uncle would be proud of, and when the time was right, when they had revealed every truth about their characters, he'd show them what real success looked like. Not revenge, something better. Justice with grace. Daniel spent the next 2 weeks living in his empty apartment, meeting secretly with Helen and her team to structure his inheritance. They set up trusts, investment strategies, and what Helen called strategic positioning. His uncle had been brilliant about more than money. He left detailed notes about patience, timing, and human nature. The emptiness of his home was actually useful now. Daniel had sold his furniture to pay for Amanda's final round of treatment, and he'd decided not to replace it yet. Let Amanda think he was still struggling. Let Richard think his employee was still desperate. Meanwhile, Daniel learned about his uncle's empire. William Cooper had started with a single property in the 1970s and built an empire of commercial and residential real estate. He'd invested in neighborhoods before they gentrified, bought struggling properties and renovated them thoughtfully, created affordable housing alongside luxury developments. He'd made money, but he'd done it with integrity. Your uncle had a philosophy, Helen explained during one of their meetings. He called it profitable compassion. He believed you could make money while making communities better, that wealth and ethics weren't opposites. He proved it for 50 years. Daniel studied the portfolio, office buildings, apartment complexes, shopping centers, mixed-use developments, and then he saw it, a familiar address. This building, he said, pointing, this is where I work. Helen nodded slowly. Hastings Commercial Real Estate leases 3 floors from one of your uncle's holding companies. They don't know who owns it. It's buried under corporate structures. But yes, Daniel, you're technically Richard Hastings' landlord. The irony was almost painful. Daniel had been working for a man who was paying rent to Daniel's family without knowing it. Richard, who'd taken Amanda and flaunted his wealth, was building his success on property Daniel now owned. Don't act yet, Helen advised. Your uncle's notes are very clear about this. Watch first, learn. Let them show you everything before you make any moves. Daniel agreed, but it was harder than he'd expected. He went back to work on Monday, taking the bus because he still hadn't replaced his car, walking into the gleaming lobby of a building he now owned. Richard's assistant, his new assistant, since Amanda had quit to focus on herself, smiled at him with pity. Daniel, hi, Mr. Hastings wants to see you. He walked to Richard's office, the corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows and custom furniture. Richard looked up from his desk, his expression a calculated mixture of concern and superiority. Daniel, come in. Sit down. Richard gestured to the chair across from his desk, the power position, making Daniel the subordinate. I wanted to check in. I know the divorce has been difficult. I'm managing, Daniel said quietly. Good, good. Listen, I feel responsible in a way. Amanda and I, he paused, perfectly timed. We didn't mean for things to develop the way they did. It just happened. You understand? Daniel understood perfectly. Richard wanted absolution. He wanted Daniel to make this easy, to play the gracious loser so Richard could feel better about what he'd done. These things happen, Daniel said, keeping his voice neutral. Richard's relief was visible. Exactly. Mature attitude, Daniel. That's what I appreciate about you. You're reasonable. Look, I know things have been tight financially. I'm prepared to offer you a raise. 5% starting next month. And I'll personally write a recommendation if you want to find something with better opportunities. Translation: take this small gesture and leave so I don't have to face what I did every day. That's generous, Daniel said. I'll think about it. You do that. Richard stood, the dismissal clear. Oh, and Daniel, Amanda mentioned she needs to pick up some things from your place. I hope you can be civil about that. She's been through a lot. Amanda, who'd survived cancer because Daniel had bankrupted himself to pay for treatment. Amanda, who'd recovered in a hospital room paid for by Daniel's sacrificed possessions and destroyed credit. She'd been through a lot. Daniel stood. I'll be civil. He left Richard's office and went to his cubicle, the small workspace on the third floor he'd occupied for 4 years. Around him, co-workers whispered. They all knew about Amanda and Richard. Some looked at Daniel with pity, others with schadenfreude. He was the office cautionary tale, the guy who'd given everything for a woman who'd left him for the boss. But Daniel looked around the office with new eyes. This floor, this space, these people, they all existed in a building he owned. Richard's success, his corner office, his ability to steal other men's wives, it was all built on property that now belonged to the man he'd betrayed. Daniel's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mr. Cooper, this is James Martinez from Martinez Construction. Your uncle worked with my father for 30 years. Ms. Vasquez gave me your number. I heard about your inheritance and wanted to reach out. Your uncle was the best client we ever had. Fair, honest, visionary. If you need anything built or renovated, I'd be honored to continue our relationship. He talked about you often, said you were the only family member worth a damn. Daniel stepped into the stairwell for privacy and called the number. James Martinez answered immediately. Mr. Cooper? Call me Daniel. You knew my uncle? Knew him and loved him. William gave my father his first big contract 40 years ago when nobody else would hire a Mexican immigrant with more ambition than credentials. We built everything together. His first apartment building, his office complexes, his affordable housing projects. He changed our family's life. They talked for an hour. James told stories about William, his generosity, his vision, his absolute refusal to cut corners or exploit workers. Daniel learned that his uncle had built his empire by treating people fairly, paying well, creating opportunities. Your uncle told me about you, James said finally. About a year ago, he called me. He was sick by then, though he didn't say how sick. He told me about your wife's cancer, how you'd sold everything to save her. He was crying, Daniel. Said you reminded him of himself at your age, before he made his fortune, when he was just a man trying to do the right thing. Daniel's throat tightened. He never contacted me. He wanted to, but he said, and I remember this exactly, he said, I need to know who Daniel becomes when he has nothing but his character, and I need his wife to reveal who she is before wealth enters the equation. He was testing you both. I failed. My marriage ended. No, Daniel, you passed. You showed integrity under pressure. She failed. She showed her true nature. Your uncle knew she would. He just needed you to see it for yourself. After the call, Daniel sat in the stairwell for a long time. His uncle had been watching, assessing, preparing. William had known Amanda would leave. He'd known but let Daniel experience it because some lessons could only be learned through pain. Daniel went back to his cubicle and worked through the afternoon, processing lease agreements and property documents for Richard's deals. Each paper he reviewed was ironic. He was helping his boss negotiate leases and acquisitions while secretly owning more property than Richard could imagine. At 5 o'clock, Amanda walked into the office. She looked different. Her hair was professionally styled, her clothes expensive. New wardrobe, probably courtesy of Richard. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost during treatment, her skin glowing with health. The health Daniel had paid for. She saw him and approached his cubicle, her expression carefully arranged into apologetic concern. Daniel, hi. I texted about picking up my things. I got it. This weekend is fine. Great. Thank you for being reasonable about this. She paused and something flickered across her face. Satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. I know this has been hard for you, but I think in the long run, we'll both be happier. We wanted different things. What did you want, Amanda? She blinked, surprised by the directness. Security, stability, a future that wasn't just scraping by. I was scraping by to save your life. Her face hardened. And I'm grateful for that, Daniel. I really am. But gratitude isn't the same as love. I can't spend my life with someone just because they helped me when I was sick. That's not fair to either of us. The rationalization was breathtaking. She'd rewritten their entire history, turned his sacrifice into a burden, transformed her betrayal into liberation. You're right, Daniel said quietly. You should be with someone you actually love. Amanda relaxed, relieved. I'm glad you understand. Richard and we're good together. He gets me in ways you never did. And honestly, Daniel, you deserve someone who appreciates the simple life you want. I need more than that. More than saving her life. More than sacrificing everything. More than love that bankrupted itself to keep her alive. I hope you and Richard are happy, Daniel said. And he meant it. Not because he forgave her, but because her happiness with Richard was the best punishment he could imagine. They deserved each other. Amanda smiled, genuinely relieved. Thank you. That means a lot. Oh, and Richard mentioned he's giving you a raise? That's so generous of him. He really does care about his employees. She left, and Daniel watched her go. Richard appeared moments later, putting his arm around Amanda's waist with possessive pride. They walked through the office together, the boss and his new girlfriend, the success story built on another man's pain. Daniel's co-workers watched him, waiting for a reaction. He gave them nothing, just returned to his work, filing documents for buildings he owned in a company that paid him rent he'd never collect personally. That night he met with Helen and James Martinez at a restaurant Daniel could finally afford to eat at. I want to build something, Daniel said. Something my uncle would be proud of. What did you have in mind, Helen asked. Affordable housing, not just cheap apartments. Quality places where people struggling like I was can live with dignity. Mixed income communities that actually work. I want to use my uncle's model, profitable compassion. James grinned. Your uncle would love that. Where do you want to start? Daniel pulled out his phone, showing them a neighborhood map. Here, 3 blocks from where I grew up. The area is being gentrified, pushing out families who've lived there for generations. I want to buy property and develop it responsibly, preserve affordability while improving quality. They talked for 3 hours, sketching plans and possibilities. Helen managed the financial structures. James described construction approaches. Daniel absorbed everything, feeling purpose crystallize for the first time since Amanda had left. When he got home to his empty apartment, he found another text from Amanda. Saturday at 10 a.m. work for you? Richard is helping me move my stuff. Hope that's okay. Of course Richard was coming. Of course they wanted to parade their relationship in front of him to make sure he understood how completely he'd been replaced. Daniel texted back, that's fine. He spent Friday evening with James Martinez, touring his uncle's properties and learning about the empire he'd inherited. Each building had a story. The apartment complex where William had housed 3 refugee families rent-free for a year. The office building he'd sold at a loss to a nonprofit. The shopping center he'd anchored with local businesses instead of national chains. Your uncle made money, James explained, but he made it by lifting people up, not stepping on them. He proved you could be wealthy and ethical. That's rare, Daniel. That's precious. Saturday morning, Daniel cleaned the apartment. Not that there was much to clean. The empty rooms echoed. He'd kept only essentials. A mattress on the floor, a folding chair, a few dishes. Everything else had been sold for Amanda's treatment. At 10 o'clock exactly, Amanda knocked. Daniel opened the door to find her standing with Richard, who looked around the empty apartment with barely concealed disgust. Jesus, Daniel, Richard said. This is depressing. I sold the furniture to pay for Amanda's chemotherapy, Daniel said evenly. Amanda had the grace to look uncomfortable. Richard just shrugged. Well, you're free to start over now. Fresh start and all that. They gathered Amanda's remaining items. Clothes she'd left behind, some books, kitchen items Daniel had somehow missed when selling everything. It took 20 minutes. As they loaded the last box, Richard paused. You know, Daniel, no hard feelings about the whole situation. Amanda and I, we're good for each other. You'll find someone who's good for you, someone who doesn't need as much. He said it like a kindness, like he was doing Daniel a favor by stealing his wife and explaining why it was actually Daniel's fault. I'm sure I will, Daniel said. Amanda touched his arm, a gesture that probably felt magnanimous to her. Thank you for being so mature about this. A lot of men would have made this ugly. I'm not a lot of men, Daniel said quietly. No, you're not. You're a good guy, Daniel. You'll be okay. She said it like a blessing, like she was absolving him of inadequacy. They left. Daniel watched from his window as Richard loaded boxes into his Mercedes, laughing at something Amanda said. They drove away and Daniel was alone in his empty apartment with $600 million in assets they didn't know existed. He thought about his uncle's letter. Let them see who you've become, not to hurt them, but to show them the cost of their choices. Daniel made a decision. He would build his affordable housing project. He would continue working at Richard's company, filing paperwork and watching his boss's business maneuvers. He would learn everything about how Richard operated, where his deals were strong and where they were vulnerable. And when the time was right, when he'd built something meaningful and proven his uncle's philosophy worked, he would reveal himself, not with cruelty, with consequence. 3 months passed. Daniel worked during the day at Hastings Commercial Real Estate and spent his evenings and weekends building his legacy. With James Martinez's expertise and Helen Vasquez's financial guidance, they acquired 6 properties in his childhood neighborhood, old buildings that needed renovation, empty lots that needed development. Daniel insisted on doing it right. Fair wages for workers, quality materials, thoughtful design that respected the neighborhood's character. Units priced for actual working families, not just people who could afford affordable housing that wasn't actually affordable. The first building opened in December, a renovated brownstone with 8 apartments, a community room, and a small courtyard garden. Daniel attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony in jeans and a worn jacket, anonymous among the crowd. The neighborhood gathered to celebrate, and Daniel watched families tour their new homes with joy that made his chest ache. A woman in her 50s, Maria Rodriguez, approached him. Are you with the development company? I'm involved, yes. Tell whoever's in charge. Tell them thank you. My family's been trying to stay in this neighborhood for 20 years, getting pushed out bit by bit. This apartment means my grandkids can stay in their school, near their friends. This is everything to us. Daniel shook her hand. I'll pass along your thanks. At work, Richard was thriving. He'd closed 3 major deals in as many months, expanding his company's portfolio aggressively. He'd also gotten engaged to Amanda, a Valentine's Day proposal she'd posted extensively on social media. The diamond ring she'd always told Daniel was too expensive and impractical. Daniel saw the posts and felt nothing but gratitude. They were showing him exactly who they were. In March, Richard called Daniel into his office. I've got an opportunity I think you should know about. There's a development project happening in the Riverside neighborhood, multiple properties being renovated, affordable housing mixed with retail space. It's getting attention from investors and the city. I'm trying to find out who's behind it so we can approach them about partnering or acquiring the properties. Daniel kept his expression neutral. Sounds interesting. It is. Whoever's doing this has deep pockets and serious connections. They're doing everything right. Community engagement, quality construction, actual affordability. It's making my projects look bad by comparison. Richard laughed, but there was an edge to it. I need to either partner with them or compete with them. Can you do some research? Find out who owns the development company? I'll see what I can find. Daniel spent the next week pretending to research his own company while actually learning everything about Richard's business operations. He discovered that Richard's success was built on aggressive tactics, buying properties cheap by pressuring distressed owners, flipping them quickly for maximum profit, cutting corners on renovations to inflate margins. Richard made money by exploiting people's vulnerability. The contrast with his uncle's approach was stark. William had built wealth by creating value. Richard extracted wealth by exploiting need. In April, Daniel's second building opened, a mixed-use development with affordable apartments above small retail spaces for local businesses. The community response was overwhelming. Local papers covered the project, praising the anonymous investor who was proving ethical development is possible. One article quoted an urban planning professor, "Whoever's behind the Riverside Renaissance project understands what so many developers don't. You can make money while making communities better. This is the model every city needs." Richard read the article at his desk, his jaw tight. "Find out who this is," he told Daniel. "This investor is making waves, and I need to know who I'm competing with." "I'm working on it," Daniel said. That evening, James Martinez called. "Daniel, we've got a problem, or maybe an opportunity. Richard Hastings is sniffing around our projects. He's been calling contractors, asking questions about who's hiring them." "Let him ask," Daniel said. "What's he going to find?" "A bunch of shell companies and corporate structures." "But he's persistent. Eventually, he might piece things together." "Then maybe it's time to let him," Daniel said slowly, "but on my terms." He met with Helen the next day. "I want to expand the project, faster and bigger. I want to buy more properties in Riverside, but I also want to start looking at Richard's vulnerable holdings. Where is he overextended? Where could a competitor hurt him most?" Helen pulled up files. "Richard's been aggressive with acquisitions lately. He's leveraged heavily on 3 properties, an office complex downtown, a retail center in Riverside, and a residential development in Parkside. If those deals go badly, his company could be in serious trouble. The retail center in Riverside, that's near my properties. 3 blocks away, he's planning to turn it into luxury condos, displacing existing tenants. He's been pressuring them to leave, offering minimal buyouts." Daniel knew those tenants. He'd grown up with people like them. They were exactly the families his uncle had protected. "I want to make those tenants an offer," Daniel said. "Fair market value for their leases, plus relocation assistance and first priority for units in my developments. And I want to buy the property from Richard before he can convert it." Helen smiled. "That would hurt him financially and reputationally." "Good. My uncle taught me that consequences should be instructive, not just punitive. Richard needs to learn that exploiting vulnerable people has costs." Over the next month, Daniel's team approached every tenant in Richard's retail center. They offered generous terms, buyouts that actually reflected the value of their businesses, moving assistance, priority placement in newly renovated spaces in Daniel's developments. One by one, the tenants accepted. Richard was blindsided. His project collapsed as his tenants left, and his financing fell through. He called emergency meetings, demanding answers. "Someone is targeting my deal," he told his staff. "Someone with serious money is deliberately sabotaging this project. I want to know who." Daniel sat in that meeting, taking notes, saying nothing. But Amanda figured it out first. She appeared at Daniel's cubicle in May, her expression confused and calculating. "Daniel, can we talk? Privately." They went to the stairwell. Amanda looked different, stressed, uncertain. The confidence she'd worn like armor was cracking. "Richard's been having problems with the Riverside deal," she said carefully. "And I've been hearing things about this anonymous investor doing affordable housing in the same area. There are rumors about who might be behind it." "What kind of rumors?" "Crazy ones. People saying it might be someone connected to William Cooper, that old real estate investor who died last year." She watched his face. "Daniel, that was your uncle's name. The one your family never talked about." Daniel said nothing. Amanda's eyes widened. "Oh my God, did your uncle leave you money? Is that why you're so calm about everything?" "Daniel, did you—" She stopped, the realization hitting her. "How much did he leave you?" "Why does it matter?" "Because Richard and we assumed you were struggling. We felt bad about how things ended, but we thought you were—" "Daniel, how much?" He looked at her, really looked at her. She was beautiful still, healthy because of his sacrifice, wearing expensive clothes bought with Richard's money. And she was calculating, trying to figure out if she'd made a mistake. "Amanda, does the amount change anything? Would it change what you did? Would it change why you left?" "No, but—" She struggled for words. "You let us think you had nothing. I let you think what you wanted to think. You saw what you wanted to see. Just like you saw me as insufficient when I was selling everything to save your life? That's not fair. You left me 2 weeks after I bankrupted myself to pay for your cancer treatment. You moved in with my boss, the man you'd been seeing while I worked 3 jobs to afford your chemotherapy. You told me I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Was any of that fair, Amanda? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. I made a mistake. No, you made a choice, and that choice revealed who you are. I'm actually grateful for it. You taught me to see clearly. Daniel, wait! She touched his arm, the same gesture she'd used when moving out. But now it was desperate. If you have money, if your uncle left you something significant, we should talk. Richard and I, things are complicated. He's stressed about his deals, and I've been thinking. Thinking what? That maybe you should have stayed with the man who loved you enough to sell everything for you? I'm thinking that maybe we ended things too quickly. That maybe if we'd known about your uncle's money, we could have worked things out differently. There it was, the truth laid bare. She didn't regret leaving him. She regretted leaving his money. Amanda, I need to get back to work, Daniel said quietly. You made your choice. Live with it. He walked away, leaving her in the stairwell. That evening, Richard called him at home. Daniel, we need to talk. Can you come to the office tomorrow morning? Early, before everyone else gets in? Daniel knew what was coming. Sure. He arrived at 7 a.m. to find Richard in his office, looking haggard. The confident boss who'd stolen his wife was gone, replaced by a stressed man facing financial trouble. Close the door, Richard said. We need to discuss something sensitive. Daniel sat. The Riverside project is dead, Richard said bluntly. Someone systematically poached every one of my tenants and killed my financing. This was coordinated, professional, and expensive. Someone wanted to hurt me specifically. That's unfortunate. It's more than unfortunate. It's targeted. And Amanda had an interesting theory about who might have the resources and motivation to do this. Richard leaned forward. Did your uncle leave you money, Daniel? Why would you think that? Because I'm not an idiot. Your uncle was William Cooper, the real estate investor. He died last year. You're his nephew. And suddenly someone with serious capital is operating in the exact market where I'm vulnerable, using tactics that look a lot like your uncle's old strategies. So I'll ask again, did he leave you money? Daniel looked at the man who'd taken his wife, who'd pitied him, who'd offered him a 5% raise like a charitable gesture. The man sitting in an office inside a building Daniel owned. Yes, Daniel said simply. He left me everything. Richard's face went white. Everything. How much is everything? Enough. Daniel, listen to me. Richard's voice shifted to negotiation mode. If you have resources, we should talk partnership. We could work together. My expertise, your capital. You mean your exploitation and my money? That's not fair. I'm a good businessman. You're a predatory businessman. You profit from other people's desperation. You buy low from distressed sellers, flip fast, cut corners, and extract maximum profit without caring about communities or people. That's not business. That's extraction. Richard's jaw tightened. And what are you, some kind of saint? You're targeting my deals specifically. That's personal, Daniel. You're right. It is personal. You took my wife while I was working 3 jobs to save her life. You slept with her in this office, in this building that I now own, by the way, while I was cleaning floors at night to afford her chemotherapy. You offered me a 5% raise like charity while planning your life with my wife. So yes, Richard, it's personal, but it's also principled. You own this building? My uncle owned it. Now I do. You've been paying rent to my family for 8 years. The irony is almost poetic. Richard stood up, pacing. Daniel, we can work this out. Whatever I did. You can't work this out. You can't apologize your way out of character. You showed me who you are. You showed Amanda who you are, though she's too calculating to care. You've shown this whole company who you are. I'm just making sure there are consequences. Consequences? You're going to what? Destroy my business? No. I'm going to compete with you honestly and beat you ethically. I'm going to prove my uncle's philosophy that you can build wealth without exploiting people. I'm going to create affordable housing while you create luxury condos nobody needs. I'm going to lift communities while you extract from them, and the market will decide which approach succeeds. Daniel stood. Oh, and Richard, I quit. I don't need this job. I never did after the inheritance. I stayed to learn about your business operations and to understand exactly how exploitative your practices are. Now I know everything I need to know. He walked out, leaving Richard stunned in his office. By the end of the week, the entire company knew. Daniel Cooper, the pitied divorcee who'd lost everything, was actually a multimillionaire. The shy guy in the cubicle owned the building they worked in. The man Richard had betrayed and pitied owned more property in 3 states than Richard's entire company. Amanda called 17 times. Daniel blocked her number. Richard tried to salvage his reputation by spreading stories about Daniel's vindictive behavior, but the narrative didn't hold. Daniel hadn't done anything illegal or even unethical. He just competed successfully using his uncle's approach of profitable compassion. Meanwhile, the Riverside Renaissance project expanded. Daniel's team opened 4 more buildings, each one celebrated by the community. He hired local workers, used local contractors, supported local businesses. He proved that ethical development could be profitable. In September, the city council honored him at a public ceremony. They'd requested his presence as the anonymous investor behind the Riverside project, promising discretion. Daniel agreed to attend, but arrived quietly, still wearing jeans and a simple jacket. The mayor praised the project in her speech. The Riverside Renaissance has transformed not just buildings, but lives. Families can afford to stay in their neighborhoods. Local businesses are thriving. This is development done right. Then she said, and I'm honored to introduce the man behind this vision, Daniel Cooper, son of Riverside himself, carrying on his uncle William Cooper's legacy of ethical investment. Daniel stood as the community applauded. He saw people he'd grown up with, families he'd helped house, business owners whose shops now had affordable space. He also saw, in the back, Richard Hastings and Amanda. They'd come, probably hoping for networking opportunities. Now they stood frozen, watching Daniel accept recognition for accomplishments they'd never imagined he could achieve. Daniel gave a brief speech. My uncle taught me that wealth is responsibility, not just opportunity. He showed me that you can make money by lifting people up instead of stepping on them. Everything I'm doing is honoring his philosophy and trying to help the community that raised me. This isn't my success, it's ours, built together. More applause. After the ceremony, people wanted to talk to him, to thank him, to share their stories. Daniel spent 2 hours listening, connecting, understanding the impact of what he'd built. Richard and Amanda waited until the crowd thinned. They approached together, their expressions carefully neutral. Daniel, Richard started. Congratulations. Very impressive. Thank you. Amanda touched his arm, that familiar gesture now desperate and calculated. Daniel, I need to talk to you, privately, please. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, just 5 minutes. Her eyes were pleading, and Daniel saw calculation behind the emotion. She'd rehearsed this, prepared her approach. Against his better judgment, he agreed. They stepped outside, leaving Richard inside. I made a terrible mistake, Amanda said immediately. I was scared and selfish, and I didn't see what I had with you. Daniel, I'm so sorry. Richard isn't who I thought he was. He's cold. He's obsessed with money. He doesn't actually care about me. I want to try again. With you. Daniel looked at her. This woman he'd loved enough to sacrifice everything for, and felt nothing but sadness. Amanda, you don't want me. You want my money. You left me when you thought I had nothing, and you're coming back now that you know I have something. That's not love. That's not even regret. That's just greed. That's not fair. I sold my car to pay for your treatment. I pawned my grandfather's watch, the only thing my father left me. I maxed out credit cards, worked 3 jobs, sold my wedding ring. I gave you everything I had, and you left me for a man with a bigger bank account. Now you know I have the biggest bank account of all, and suddenly you've discovered you made a mistake? I was wrong about what mattered. No, Amanda, you were consistent about what mattered. Money, security, status. Those things still matter to you. You're just recalculating which option provides more of them. That's not growth. That's strategy. Daniel, please. I hope you and Richard work out. I really do. You deserve each other. Two people who measure worth in possessions instead of character. But even if you don't work out, even if you end up alone, I won't be your backup plan. I won't be the man you settled for when your first choice didn't work out. I never settled for you. Yes, you did. You settled for me until someone better came along, or someone you thought was better. And when he stops being better, when Richard's business continues to struggle, when the stress destroys your relationship, when you're looking for the next upgrade, you'll leave him too, because that's who you are. Daniel turned to leave. Amanda grabbed his hand. I saved your life, Daniel said quietly, not turning around. I sold everything I owned to pay for your treatment. I worked myself to exhaustion to keep you alive. And 2 weeks after you recovered, you left me. That's who you are, Amanda. Believe yourself. He walked away. This time she didn't follow. Inside, Richard was waiting. She try to get you back? Yes. She'll try with me next. Beg me to make things work now that my business is struggling and yours is thriving. Richard laughed bitterly. We deserve each other, you know. Two people who chose money over character. You could change, Daniel said, surprising himself. Could I? Could you forgive me? Forgiveness isn't about you, Richard. It's about me not carrying poison. I forgive you because holding on to anger would damage me more than it would hurt you. But forgiveness doesn't mean trust. It doesn't mean friendship. It means I release you from owing me anything because I don't want to be connected to you anymore. Richard nodded slowly. Your uncle would be proud of you. I hope so. That's all I really wanted. A year later, Daniel stood in his new office. Not a corporate high-rise, but a renovated community center in Riverside. The Cooper Foundation operated from here, managing his affordable housing projects, his small business grants, his scholarship programs for kids caring for sick relatives. The foundation had grown beyond Daniel's initial vision. He'd partnered with other ethical investors, created a network of developers committed to profitable compassion, proved that his uncle's approach could scale. Richard's company had downsized, not destroyed, but diminished, forced to compete with developers who actually cared about communities. Richard had sold his penthouse, moved to something smaller, rebuilt slowly with less aggressive tactics. Daniel heard he'd broken up with Amanda 6 months after the ceremony. She'd moved to another city, chasing another opportunity. Daniel didn't track them. He was too busy building. Maria Rodriguez, the grandmother from his first building opening, worked at the foundation now as community liaison. She'd introduced Daniel to dozens of families, helping him understand what communities actually needed versus what developers thought they needed. Daniel, there's someone here to see you, Maria said one October afternoon. Says he's a reporter for the national news. Wants to do a story about ethical development. The interview aired the following month. It featured the Riverside Renaissance, profiled families who'd been helped, interviewed business owners thriving in affordable spaces. Daniel talked about his uncle's philosophy, about profitable compassion, about proving that wealth and ethics weren't opposites. At the end, the reporter asked, "You inherited this money after personal tragedy and betrayal. Didn't you ever want revenge?" Daniel thought about that question for a long time before answering. Revenge would have been easy. I could have destroyed the people who hurt me. I had the resources, but my uncle taught me that the best response to betrayal isn't revenge. It's becoming someone they can't touch anymore. Not because they can't hurt you, but because you've built something so meaningful that their actions become irrelevant. Did it work? Yes. The people who betrayed me chose money over character. I chose to build character with money. They ended up with neither. I ended up with both. That's not revenge. That's just consequence. The segment went viral. Daniel's phone exploded with messages from investors, cities, organizations wanting to replicate his model. The Cooper Foundation became a blueprint for ethical development nationwide. 6 months after that, Daniel received a letter. The return address was a small town in Oregon. He opened it carefully. Dear Mr. Cooper, you don't know me, but I know your story. I'm a widow caring for my disabled son, trying to keep our small bookstore open while developers push us out. I saw your interview. Is what you're doing real? Can development actually be ethical? Could someone like you help someone like me? I don't expect anything. I just needed to ask. Sincerely, Catherine Morrison. Daniel read the letter 3 times. Then he called Helen Vasquez. I need you to research a bookstore in Oregon. Owner is Catherine Morrison. Find out what she needs and how we can help. Expanding into Oregon? Expanding into anywhere people need help. That's what my uncle wanted. That's what I want. 2 weeks later, Daniel flew to Oregon and walked into Morrison's books. Catherine looked up from the register. Mid-50s, tired, worried. Her son sat in a wheelchair by the window reading. Catherine Morrison, I'm Daniel Cooper. Her face went white. You came? I didn't think... I hoped, but I didn't actually expect... Tell me about your situation. Tell me what you need. They talked for 3 hours. Daniel learned about her husband's death, her son's accident, the medical bills, and the predatory developer pressuring her to sell. He learned about her love for books and community, her determination to stay open despite impossible odds. It was his story. It was everyone's story who'd ever been crushed by circumstances beyond their control. I'll buy your building, Daniel said. Fair market value with a guarantee that you can keep operating your bookstore. We'll renovate, add affordable apartments above, create a community space. You'll have security and the neighborhood keeps its bookstore. Sound good? Catherine cried. Her son wheeled over and shook Daniel's hand. On the flight home, Daniel thought about his uncle's letter. Build something beautiful. Help people who are struggling the way you struggled. He'd done it, he was doing it, and he'd keep doing it. Amanda sent him a message that week. He almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. I saw your interview. You've built something amazing. I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry. I know you won't respond, but I needed to say it. Daniel closed the message without responding. She was right. He wouldn't respond. Not out of anger, but out of indifference. She belonged to a past version of his life, a chapter closed and learned from. He opened his email and found 23 more requests from people like Catherine. Struggling business owners, families facing displacement, communities fighting predatory development. Daniel smiled. This was his inheritance. Not just money, but purpose. His uncle had left him the resources to make a difference. Amanda and Richard had taught him why it mattered. He got to work.